Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. For those of you that I haven't got to meet, my name is Nicole Genovese, and I'm the Operations Manager for Impact Austin. It's my pleasure on behalf of our members board and staff to welcome you to our final Discovery Day session of 2023, Collaboration for Greater Impact. Thanks so much for sharing your lunch hour with us today. I'd like to extend a special thank you to our Discovery Day sponsor, our title sponsor, FBF Law Injury Attorneys, and also a thank you to our premium sponsor, C2C Media. Thank you so much for your generosity and helping to make our philanthropy education take place today. For those of you who may be just learning about Impact Austin today, I'd like to take a minute to share a bit more about us before we begin today's program. Impact Austin is a women's collective giving organization funding Central Texas nonprofits that provide services in Bastrop, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson counties. Our membership is open to any individual that identifies as a woman, and together our members pool their resources and decide collectively how to award multiple high-impact grants each year. Our mission is to cultivate and expand the knowledge, passion, and generosity of our members to make a positive impact by developing strong relationships and leveraging the power of collective giving. Our values are inclusivity, empathy, curiosity, and impact. I mention these especially because all of you that are joining us for today's session are already sharing two of these values, curiosity and impact. We're really excited to learn how we can increase our reach through collaboration from today's speakers. Since 2003, Impact Austin members have collectively donated over $8.26 million to Central Texas nonprofits. That's a really big number on its own, but it carries even greater weight when I think about how those funds were pooled. So $1,000 at a time from individual members to get us to that $8.26 million. Really thinking about collaboration today just really puts that number in perspective. I look forward to updating this chart that you see now in just a few short months to reflect our 20th anniversary year, when we will have even more organizations served and women philanthropists that have joined our collective. You may be curious about how our grants are decided that we're illustrating on this slide. Every grant cycle, our Impact Austin members work together in grant review committees to narrow the applicants to 2 finalists in each focus area. These 2 finalists are then put before our entire membership for a vote, 1 woman, 1 vote. The top vote getter will receive the primary grant, which is 80% of the total dollars collected for that focus area. The other finalist will receive a secondary grant of 20% of the total dollars collected from our membership. This secondary grant is awarded as unrestricted funding. Our 2023 grant-making cycle begins with Girls Giving Grants in April. G3 is how it's commonly used, term that we use to call this program, is our youth initiative, where young women in grades 8 to 12 go through a very, very similar process as our adult members, reviewing grant applications and awarding funds to an organization working to improve the lives of youth in Central Texas. Our adult Impact Austin members will award grants in community and education this June, and health and well-being and equity in November. Our community and education review committees actually just kicked off their work this week, and we're really looking forward to announcing our new community partners at our annual meeting on June 5th, which will also be our big celebration for our 20th anniversary year. We hope you can join us. Of course, we cannot do this work without the generosity and commitment of our past and current members. The needs in our community are greater than ever, and each member that joins us increases the funds that Impact Austin is able to grant out to organizations each year. I invite you to visit our website, impactaustin.org, to read more about what we do and how you can be a part of this collective giving movement. And you can reach us anytime with questions that you may have about membership, grant making, or otherwise at contact@impactaustin.org. With all that said, let's jump into why we're all here today. First, I just have a few reminders. There's a Q&A function that you can use to submit your questions anytime during the session. We'll have some time saved at the end that we will get to those. You can also react, comment, or pick up resources throughout the session, as you'll already see in the chat box. So make sure that you're paying attention to those too for information. We're recording today's session, so you'll be able to reference it later or maybe share with a friend that wasn't able to join us today. Please join me in welcoming to today's panelists, Karen LaShelle and Jenny Everett. It's so great to have both of you with us today, and I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's just start off with each of you telling us a bit more about you, your background, and the organization that you're representing today. Karen, would you kick us off?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me here. This is a real pleasure to meet with this group. I've been a recipient of Impact Austin money in the past, and it's just feels really full circle to be here at this point, and just really grateful for Impact Austin and all that you've done. So I'm from Austin Together. I'm the part-time executive director of a relatively new initiative. We really got started in 2018 and are kind of just now really hitting the ground. And what we do is we enable sustained collaborations in the Central Texas region with the goal of really strengthening the nonprofit sector through helping people figure out ways to work together that eventually we believe will improve the lives of folks in the Central Texas area. So we do a few things. We provide funding to organizations that are trying to explore, plan, and implement collaborations. We also provide a process to really help folks understand the steps you need to go through to form a successful collaboration. And we also provide guides, and those are volunteers from the community who are attached to each of our different collaborations and provide like a neutral third-party advising role to the collaborations to help folks deal with the challenges that emerge as you're trying to form a collaboration. So for us, collaboration is really anything along a pretty big spectrum of ways that can manifest. It can be anything from a collective or a coalition to more of a shared service or shared back office or co-location, all the way up to more of a formal organizational merger. So we really do support a variety of kinds of collaboration. And since 2019, we've given out about $850,000 in grants and reached probably about 60 different organizations at this point who have participated in our process. So that's hopefully just a quick overview of kind of who we are and what we do.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, I'm Jenny Everett, and I am wearing a variety of different hats in this conversation. So one is my former role as managing director of an organization called the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, or ANDE, which is a global organization, a global network of organizations that invest in and support small and growing businesses and entrepreneurs in emerging markets. So a lot of that work was around bringing actors together in collaboration and field building. I now do that independently as a consultant, but then I am also wearing my social venture partners Austin hat. SVP Austin is a local organization that brings members of the community together to provide time, treasure, and talent in supporting nonprofit leaders through advisory engagements. So I am a volunteer partner with SVP, and I am a member of Impact Austin. And in the spirit of collaboration, SVP and Impact Austin have a somewhat new collaboration. So I'm representing that collaboration here as well.
Awesome, thank you both. And Karen, I know that you talked a little bit about, the approach Austin Together has to thinking about collaboratives, but I wonder if maybe you could just kind of ground us for this session, talking a little bit more about what the word collaboration means and kind of the different ways that could show up in the community as we're kind of going to expand on that throughout the session.
Sure. So the kind of collaboration that we are primarily focused on is what's really called sustained collaboration, which is really looking at how a sustained collaboration is something that's more fundamental change to the way folks might approach solving a problem. And it's typically more of a long-term dedicated collaboration. So not a short-term, like maybe partnering on a program, which there's nothing wrong with that. But what we're really looking at are kind of larger collaborations that typically either preserve, expand, or really improve services by working together. We really believe that, collaboration comes from the organizations that themselves. We don't drive collaboration. We don't come up with the ideas and then try to pull people together. Our belief system is really one of responding to the needs of the community and centering the community and really listening to our nonprofit leaders and knowing that they really are the ones who are on the ground floor and know when and where collaboration might be the most beneficial strategy. So again, we're really talking about sustained collaboration. And like I kind of mentioned before, it can happen in a variety of ways that are along a continuum. But at the end of the day, these are really all opportunities to come together between nonprofit organizations, businesses, and government agencies that really provide an opportunity for a fundamental change to the way that we would go about solving a community problem.
Thanks so much, Karen. Jenny, I wonder if you might share, I know that you were talking about you're wearing many hats today, but I wonder if you can talk through how there's some of the approaches to collaboration and sort of thinking about that word, what that might mean to some of your volunteer experience and your work.
Yeah, a lot of my background, both professionally and through my volunteer experience, has been around ecosystem building and bringing individuals together in collaboration, which may start informally. A lot of times it's just getting people in the room to understand who's doing what, where are their potential gaps, where are their overlaps, and starting to think about how you work together. And so that could happen at a conference or a convening. It could be informal or informal. But then over time, as those conversations progress, it often leads to a deeper dive, some kind of programmatic element where you might have individuals or groups coming together to address a specific problem or look at a specific issue. And that gets a bit more formalized in structure over time. But in my experience, it really starts with just getting all of the right people in the room and figuring out who should be in the room. And that can be really messy. It takes a lot of time. It's often harder to do that and channel in all of those voices. But I think over the long run, then it's much more impactful in the type of work that we're often trying to do.
Yeah, Jenny, I wonder if you might expand on that. I know that there's so much going on behind the scenes for, you're really summarizing in a very quick way for us all of this work. And even just some of the questions that I've gotten from members when we're talking about this topic is, how do you determine who's in that room? And how do you determine, some of those things are happening maybe naturally, those relationships that they're already aware of each other. But I wonder if you might talk through a little bit more about that process of kind of getting folks together in that way.
Yeah. So thinking about it from the social venture partners approach. So a lot of what we do are short-term engagements with nonprofits who come to us because they need help, usually with a specific, often kind of business-related issue that they're facing. They want to explore revenue generation. They have a new marketing strategy that they want to test. And often nonprofit advisory services are one-on-one mentorship pairings, but with social venture partners, we often put together an engagement team so that we have, 2 or 3 different members of the community working together with a nonprofit leader who might bring in a different perspective or a different skill set. And we find that really creates the opportunity for a deeper level of conversation with the nonprofit and just some really interesting connections and synergies across those different actors that can lead to other connections within the community. Right now, we're taking it a little bit further. I'm part of a task force with SVP, and I can see many of my task force members are on this call as well. But we at Social Venture Partners have been exploring the idea of taking on a thematic focus, which is something that other SVP chapters in other cities do. And we've been looking very closely at workforce development in Central Texas because jobs are so key to all of the issues that we see in Texas, whether it's housing, childcare, transportation, it all is somehow connected to whether or not you have a good job. And so right now we're in learning mode, and we have spent the past probably 6 months doing a really deep dive with many, if not all of the organizations locally that are working on workforce development in one way or the other. First, to understand the landscape, but also to try and better understand what are the systemic issues around workforce development, and are there places where social venture partners can be additive to that. And so this is still in formation. Collaboration may look like us partnering directly with specific organizations to help them with pieces of their direct service, but it could also look like convening or bringing actors together. And so we're still figuring out who plays the lead role in that, right? Is there a role that SVP could play, or can we just be supportive to what is already going on? And I think that's, kind of the crux of figuring out collaboration, is understanding what each group brings to the table, where it makes sense to work together, where it maybe makes sense to get out of the way because there are already people leading, and then determining kind of the path forward from there. And then I guess I will add the other piece of it is really around, bringing complementary skill sets. So social venture partners, our real asset is our human capital and the volunteer time we bring from community members. So we look at ways to partner with other organizations within Central Texas who may be bringing a different piece of that. So for example, with our partnership with Impact Austin, Impact Austin's main crux is around bringing the funding, though we also bring other aspects. And so right now we're looking at ways that we can partner and bring SVPs alongside to provide additional support to the grantees after they are selected, to provide some of that additional skill support. And we're doing that with a few other organizations in town as well.
Yeah, I know we're really excited about that pilot, and we will share more about how those organizations, our grant community partners, have used those services later on this year. So stay tuned to learn more about that. So thanks so much, Jenny. Karen, I know that you talked a little bit about sort of how Austin Together is thinking about collaboratives and sort of what the drivers are for the collaboratives. I wonder if you might talk a little bit more about kind of the behind the scenes work for you, and maybe is it people reaching out to you, or how your process works working with organizations?
Yeah, I mean, we really don't drive the collaboration, and we really, based upon the research that went into developing our initiative, learned that successful collaborations really do come from the folks who will be a part of those collaborations and are not successful when they're driven by funders who want to see them happen. So we're more responsive. People reach out to us. Sometimes they already know who they'd like to collaborate with. Sometimes they're not quite sure. One thing that's a little bit fun and tricky about this work is it's really like each project is a thumbprint. You got to kind of treat each one a little bit differently. There's some principles of collaboration that are universal, but particularly at the beginning, there's a lot of, kind of to Jenny's point of kind of just figuring out like who's in the room. Is everybody that needs to be in the room here? Are there people that are in the room that maybe we don't fit with? And a lot of it's around taking time. And this is a very integral part of Austin Together. It's a very dedicated focus at the beginning on understanding why you want to form the collaboration. What is the purpose of forming this collaboration? To what end are we coming together? And are we aligned when it comes to our values and our vision? And if you can get your hands stacked around that, and you can come up with essentially like a case statement for why this is the right collaboration and partnership, then you have a much better chance of it really working. We've worked on a number of projects where in that initial stage of exploring, groups determined they weren't the right fit for each other and they let it go. And for us, that's also a success, because part of why we exist is really just to give folks an opportunity to do that exploring that we feel like folks in the nonprofit sector really don't often get the time or resources to do. So our funding actually can be used for the staff time that's used to explore and work with another nonprofit and be in kind of exploratory conversation to see what could be. And sometimes that results in something and sometimes it doesn't. We've seen entire collections of who might be a part of the initial collaboration completely change in that process. And that's why we exist. We believe that process is essential. You want to get all that taken care of on the front end. You don't want later on to realize we really didn't have the same goals. We really didn't have the same vision. So for us, we are a grant maker. So folks come to us in 3 different stages of grant making. And the first really is simply to explore. And part of what we're really trying to get groups to do in that stage is to not get into the how. Don't get into the nuts and bolts yet. You can start to talk a little bit about what you foresee some of the barriers could be. But when you kind of start getting too into the how are we going to do it, you kind of miss the bigger picture around why are we going to do it. But if you get through that first phase and you still want to pursue your collaboration, you can come back to us for an additional grant, which would help you to plan. And oftentimes that's where organizations will seek the help of consultants. and our funding is there to help them have a consultant think through whatever the heck it is that they need to. In each project, it's very different. I mean, it could be HR issues, it could be finance, it could be community engagement. You just kind of don't know. Then after we kind of create that plan, groups can come back for a third level of funding, which is focused on implementation. And that's really our largest grant. And that's really where all the pieces come together and we put the collaboration into action. So that's a little bit about our process and kind of how we believe collaboration needs a process. This isn't easy work. You have a lot of, it can be very overwhelming, be very complicated. It can make you kind of think like, oh gosh, I'm not even really sure how to do that. It can also involve a lot of ego and emotion. And so that can make it tricky. I think, some of the things that we've also seen, some of the preceding incidents that can happen before a collaboration begins, from what I recall, the number one preceding incident before a merger is often executive director transition. So it kind of gives you an indication of this is about the humans that are behind these mergers and these collaborations. And so that's why we really believe a process is necessary to help folks get through things that can be tricky, because we are asking people to focus on the larger why and not necessarily on their own organizations when they're thinking about collaboration. So this slide is actually from the Sustained Collaboration Network, which is an organization that Austin Together is a part of with 7 other organizations across the country that exist to fund collaboration in their local areas. And this kind of gives you a sense of the spectrum of the kinds of ways we see collaboration emerging and how you can really think about collaboration as a strategy that could be built into your organization's goals.
Yeah. And if I could just add and echo what Karen is saying about, one of the challenges, but really important part about collaboration is it's natural for actors to come and go over the evolution of a collaboration, but that's messy. And often it doesn't feel right, or there's egos involved, and figuring out how to navigate that is really complicated. If I think back to the early days of the Andy Network, which got started by a group of actors who sort of realized they were kind of doing the same thing and said, should we be talking? And over a course of a couple of years, they started to come together informally and then built momentum and sort of figured out a structure that led to the launch of actually an organization to host that collaboration. But there were a few actors who were really involved in the beginning. And then as the path forward became clear, realized they were no longer a fit and they had to step back. Or there were organizations that, joined initially and then their business model changed. And so maybe they left the collaboration or they came back. And that's the tricky part. Often organizations don't want to collaborate because it's hard. It takes time. It takes additional money. And I will say what I love about what Austin Together is doing is providing the framework to doing that, providing some of the funding resources. It's funny that Nicole and Karen and I were on a call yesterday preparing for this, and Karen shared that slide and reminded me of the Sustained Collaboration Network's resources. And I was playing around with it after our call, and I actually sent those resources to somebody that I'm now talking to about creating a new collaborative, saying, look, there's some additional frameworks we could be using, even though I've been doing this most of my career. And so I think just having those tools and resources is so helpful. So I'm glad to have AT around.
Yeah, and I think just providing that framework, right, to allow nonprofits to be able to, like Karen, you were saying, that the human capital, there's so much involved and can be so much pressure on nonprofits, right? That we need to be doing it all. So as you're trying to do it all and do the work, the nuts and bolts piece of it, you're also trying to figure out the how and the who and the what, all of those pieces behind the scenes too. So I love that, both of you are representing how there can be some structure and some resources to help nonprofits through that process, that they don't have to feel like they're on their own trying to figure it out. And I also just want to mention something that Karen said and go back to, is that sometimes the collaborative isn't always the answer, right? And I think intellectually, probably everyone on this call understands that, but sometimes we always, even the title of this, collaboration for greater impact, that sometimes the assumption can be made that if these organizations are working together or these people are working together, that it's going to be a exponentially more positive experience for that community. And I think that, thinking that through and going through that very structured process that Karen mentioned can be helpful. and seeing if that is true before you're spending those time and precious resources on trying to figure that out. So I wonder, we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the behind the scenes, but I wonder if both of you might give an example that your organization or you have worked through with a collaborative to kind of demonstrate some of these nuts and bolts that we've been talking about. Karen, do you mind go ahead and sharing some examples from Austin Together?
Yeah, I'll share a few kind of different examples so you can kind of see the variety. Probably one that most of you are familiar with is, which I think is maybe our largest one, which is really helping the United Way for Greater Austin merge with United Way of Williamson County. And that was just a really great example of how we could approach regional issues differently and with more impact by, Austin's changed and we're much more connected to the areas that kind of are around us. And so having these two different United Ways was no longer the best strategy to kind of solve these regional issues. So coming together, I think, we're still waiting to see the actual tangible results. A lot of times these mergers take a while for you to really see like, what are the numbers? But from what I understand so far, greater impact, preserved services, less resources being needed for back office and operations, more money being able to put into direct service and things happening on the ground. So that's kind of one example. And I think that merger took a solid year of exploring and planning and went into implementation sometime in the last year. But again, we'll stick with that group for quite a long time to understand what are really the long-term benefits. Some of the other kinds of smaller projects we've worked on, one that I really like as an example, because it's just so straightforward, was there were two food recovery organizations locally. One is called Keep Austin Fed and one is called Save the Food. One of them had a very small staff and the other was all volunteer driven, but they were both kind of trying to do the same thing, as figure out how can we get unused food to people that need food. But one group was really getting it from restaurants, and one group was really getting it from grocery stores. One group had transportation, one group had storage. So they kind of all had these different pieces of things that could be useful to come together to have a more of an ecosystem approach to how can we, save more food. And so again, that one just was completed a few months ago. But from what I understand, I think they're like doubling the amount of food that they're recovering at this time based upon coming together. So that's kind of a neat, tangible one. And then just quickly, I'll just also share, we've also helped incubate things. So the African American Leadership Institute was a new idea for a project that Beanie Coleman had. And we helped her figure out how could you incubate this and actually work a little bit with Leadership Austin and with 212 Catalysts to incubate an idea before it had to go out and become its own full nonprofit. So that's kind of another example. And then lastly, I'll also share a project we're working on right now, which I think is really exciting, is called the Maternal Health Equity Collaborative. And this one I think is really neat because it's 5 different organizations that all play a role in maternal health, from doulas to postnatal, all different kinds of things. Each organization needs and wants to sustain their forward-facing external brand and who they are. But behind the scenes, they want to form kind of a back office shared resource so that they're not all having to have, someone who's doing accounting, someone who's doing HR, et cetera. So it should enable those organizations to really thrive and do their work, but not necessarily have to put as many resources or, expertise around some of those shared services. So again, lots of different projects, but hopefully that gives you a sense of the variety of ways collaboration can increase impact.
Thanks, Karen. Jenny, I wonder if you have a couple examples you might share.
Yeah, I can share a few. So last year, I was part of an engagement team that worked on a collaboration that was with Div Inc. and UT and SVP. So Div Inc. is a local accelerator, and they had a cohort who was going through their social justice accelerator. And there was a piece of their accelerator training where they were working with the entrepreneurs in the programs to help them to define their social impact metrics and how they were measuring their impact, which is really important. I mean, first and foremost, to be able to understand the impact of a small business or what an entrepreneur is doing, but also to be able to talk about and quantify that for investors, for funders, for the communities that they're serving. And so SVP came in and brought in a bunch of our partners to serve as advisors. And there were 2 partners who were paired up, or each entrepreneur got 2 SVPs paired up with them, but we were also paired up with 2 students who were going through the UT Social Impact Program. And so together we worked with the entrepreneur to help them think through, what were the things they wanted to be measuring. And so the SVPs brought in a little bit of that kind of strategic guidance. The students did a lot of the numbers and figuring out, how are you actually going to quantify this? They were learning frameworks in their class. And then obviously the entrepreneur brought in, their idea and what they were trying to do. And, I think it was really helpful, I hope at least, to the entrepreneurs we worked with, because it gave them some metrics they could use going forward. But I also saw just some really interesting relationships come, both from the groups that we're working with each entrepreneurs, but across the portfolio. Like I see that still play out on LinkedIn today, where I see somebody promoting one of the businesses or liking another one of the businesses. And, I think that's an example where a collaboration might be short-term, but it sort of pays dividends over the long term. And I'm part of a group that's actually about to start doing that again. We're partnering with another nonprofit organization called Little Bit of Good, which is an accelerator program for nonprofits, primarily for nonprofits that are either Black-led or serving Black communities. And they go through a 4-month accelerator program. And similarly, SVPs are going to come in and just be kind of advisors throughout that process to the different leaders.
Sounds amazing. I can't wait to hear more about that. I know that speaking on behalf of Impact Austin and knowing our members as I do, that this is great information, and I'm so appreciative of both of you sharing this and sort of thinking maybe, how do I get plugged into something like this? How can I as an individual be helping some of this collaborative work that's happening in my community? And I'll say that most of them are doing that already as being a part of a collective giving circle, right? So, they're pooling their resources and as an individual to making a greater impact in that way, and sharing their time and resources with our community partners, even after the fact of getting the grant. But I wonder if maybe you could talk through some of the examples. So if somebody today on this call or knows somebody who maybe is wanting to get involved in this work with your organizations or organizations that that are doing this kind of collaborative work, how they might get plugged in.
Yeah, I can start. First of all, for anyone who's on the phone who is not a member of Impact Austin, I would recommend it. I joined about 2 years ago when I moved to Austin, and it has been such a great way to get to know Austin, to learn about nonprofits in the community, to meet other people in the community who are passionate about the work that we're doing. And very similarly, Social Venture Partners has a similar model. It's open to volunteers. We're always looking for new partners. And I think what I like about both organizations is it's really, there's a lot of problems in the world that we live in. And certainly in Austin, it's easy to just drive around and see the inequity. And it's very easy to think, I can't do anything, right? Like, what kind of impact am I going to have as an individual when problems are this big? I'm just going to stick my head in the sand. But I think the collective impact that we've seen through both of these groups shows that that's not the case, right? Coming together, whether it's to fund organizations or to provide support, and doing that in partnership is so essential. And when I was with Andy, I had the fortune of working with a guy named Willie Foote, who started Root Capital, which is an amazing organization that funds smallholder farmers around the world. And he talks all the time about this idea of pathological collaboration, right? That the problems are so big, we have to be doing them together, and every person's contribution really makes a difference. And that sounds very Margaret Meady of me, but if I think even about the Impact Austin model, probably not the most efficient way to give out money, right? We spend a lot of time going through this process. You have to coordinate all of these people. It might be more efficient to just have a few staff members who gave out the grants and made the decisions. But the learning that comes from that process and the way that translates out into the community and the connections that we are then able to go on and make. And, I shared with Nicole yesterday, I had a great experience in the last grant review committee that I was on, because right after we finished the site visit, somebody that I know from the Greater Houston Community Foundation reached out and was like, hey, have you ever heard of this organization in Austin? Do you know anything about them? And I was like, not only do I know them, I just went on a site visit and I can answer all of your questions. And it was great because it actually was an organization that we didn't select to fund as Impact Austin, but hopefully that learning is going to help them get funding from another organization. And I know Karen can share her perspective being on the other side of how those dividends pay forward. And so I would just encourage folks, if you're not already participating in one of these groups, that now's the time. And it doesn't take that much time either. So join us.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Jenny's saying, I mean, really in many ways, collaboration is about relationships and it's about connections. And if you don't know who else is around you that's interested in things that you're interested in, how would you know to collaborate with them? And so in many ways, the role that you all are playing to be more aware of what's out there and then to potentially be some connective tissue that's helping to introduce people or inform people about what else you see going on in any variety of parts of the nonprofit sector, that is really, really helpful. I think just your involvement and your connection to the needs of the city, which I'm sure you're all really learning a lot about through this process. If everyone was as engaged as you all are, I'm sure Austin would be in a much better situation. I shared yesterday that, one of the board members who I had in my previous role as the executive director at Creative Action, I met through Impact Austin in the year that we didn't win. We were a finalist, went through that whole process, didn't win. It felt like, oh man, what a bummer. But I met a board member through that who ended up being a very influential board member and really helped our organization significantly. And we really would never have come across her if it hadn't been for Impact Austin. So your ability to be a connector and someone who's engaged is really huge. From a more specific standpoint, we are always looking for folks to play the role of guides in our Austin Together work. And these guide roles are volunteers, but we do pay an honorarium, which is really important to me to make sure that we're compensating people for their time as best as we can. But a guide, like I mentioned before, is really a neutral third-party advisor who's there without a vested interest in either group or anyone in the group that's a part of the collaboration that can help kind of reflect things back, ask questions, offer advice, just as you're going through that process. Our guides are not project managers. They're not there to drive the process, but they play a really critical role that I kind of see rooted more in sort of emotional intelligence that's needed for these collaborations. So if you're interested in something like that, we often are looking for guides, and it's usually like a 5 to 8 hour a month commitment to be a guide. But those are ways I feel like, everyone here can really contribute to a culture of collaboration, which is, for me personally, part of what I really hope we see change and shift in the Austin area. And that we can move past kind of a scarcity mentality and a feeling of competition, but really to understand, as Nicole mentioned at the beginning, I mean, we have a lot of problems that have only gotten bigger as Austin has gotten bigger. And it's going to really require people coming together to figure out how can we all play a different part to solve that problem, rather than to always feel like we're being pitted against one another for a scarce amount of money, which is really not even true. There's quite an abundance of resources out there. So to that end, I'll kind of give a plug for something we're doing in April, and we're going to be promoting this starting next week. We're hosting an event on April 20th at the Long Center called the Culture of Collaboration Summit. And it's, we'll expect maybe like 150 people, and it's sponsored by Applied Materials. And this is an opportunity for people to come together and learn about a variety of collaborations, to be inspired, to learn some tactical information about what collaboration can look like and how you might be able to use it as a strategy within your own organization. So our goal is that people's hearts feel full afterwards, and that they feel inspired to collaborate, and that they feel like they've kind of got some real tangible ideas as to how they could make it happen in their organization. So I'll share that information with Nicole, and I'm sure she'll share it with everyone here. But we'd love to see you at that event in April. It should be really, really powerful.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. Thanks so much for putting that on. And we'll be sure to share that information with our members and those that are joining us here today. So if they're interested in attending, that they can spread the word about that. I love, well, first of all, I see that we don't have any questions at this point. Just a reminder, if you do have some questions, we're gonna open that up to folks. So please submit your questions through Q&A or through the chat, and we'll make sure to get to those. I just wanted to kind of revisit what both of you were saying about kind of those connections and the impact of that. I know that when I sort of am thinking about collective giving and how that is sort of helping to maybe disrupt philanthropy and sort of traditional philanthropy structures, I think that even just that word of sort of like philanthropy has had some connotations historically because of the way that that's been talked about in society. And I think that, collective giving movement is a way that we're trying to change some of that. So it's more of everyday philanthropists and really thinking about what philanthropy means, that's not just, I know we talk about the treasure ties testimony, all of the ways that folks can be involved, but I think that some of those are going undervalued as philanthropy. And so just kind of reinforcing what you're saying about sharing the word about, Jenny saying, oh, I just learned about this. You reached out to me and making that connection, that to me is philanthropy. And I hope that we can sort of change our mindsets a little bit about that's engaging our community, that's bettering our community. So if it feels like maybe a barrier sort of financially or volunteer wise, like that is still you contributing philanthropy to your community. So just kind of putting that out there, because I know that some folks say like, I'm not sure that I'm making an impact or how to make an impact if I have limited time and resources, that sharing your time and resources in that way, that maybe is just a casual coffee with a friend, is having an impact. So just making, thinking about it that way and kind of from that abundance mindset that Karen's talking about, I think has just been a really helpful way for me to think about philanthropy and kind of our role as individuals in our community. So it looks like we got some questions. So Linda is asking for, how does Austin Together work with collaborative groups already underway, like Success by Six at United Way? It's a specific question for you, Karen.
Yeah. So, I mean, if something's already underway and they've figured it out and it's working, it's probably not going to be an Austin Together project, just to be honest. We're really interested in figuring out how to help create more collaboration. However, we do oftentimes have people come to us and they're like, we've started on it, but we need some help. Here are the things that we're kind of struggling with. And so then we do find ways to kind of insert ourselves, even if the collaboration is already formed. And so right now, our process is very, I guess you could say, human-centered. Me really like in a lot of conversation with people trying to figure out, how to support folks and figure out what they might need. So we don't provide funding for sustaining programs or for programmatic funds at all. We're really more interested in these using our funds to help create and plan and then implement collaborations.
Right. Our next question, when cultivating or facilitating collaboration, how do you create a strategy around data collection and utilization? And what happens to that impact or programmatic data after the collaboration is complete? So I love this question. Is also sort of building on some of our previous Discovery Day sessions, talking about impact and how we measure it and sort of data and equity around data collection.
I can talk a little bit about that from my experience. I mean, often that's one of the hardest things to do because each organization coming into the collaboration already has their own system for collecting or quantifying data, right? And so ideally, you've got to get first some baseline where you're collecting the same things or counting things the same way, and then start aggregating that over time. So I will share. So when I was with Andy, a lot of our members and a lot of the organizations that support entrepreneurs globally are what are called accelerators. So Divink is an example of an accelerator here in Central Texas. And every accelerator around the world says, we have the best strategy for supporting entrepreneurs. We have the best curriculum. We have the best mentors. And we started to get questions from other actors in the ecosystem, and particularly funders, of like, how do we evaluate an accelerator? How do we understand who's really doing a good job? And so we worked over many years with a variety of actors to create a long-term research project to really look at the effectiveness of accelerators. But to do that, the research team had to make some really hard calls about how are we defining an accelerator and what was the data that was and wasn't included, and how can an accelerator participate in this. And some groups got excluded because we couldn't get, the data to match up. Some had to reconfigure their whole systems. But over time, we were able to really aggregate a large data set that was, then used by academics to really better understand the field. But it took years and a lot of money to do. It was very complicated.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that I think we're still trying to figure a lot of that out. We have some basic survey tools that we use for our groups along the way. But one of the tricks is really trying to figure out, like I was saying before, that a lot of times it takes a long time for the result of these collaborations. And so how do we stay in touch with and get meaningful data as it continues to evolve? So that's been a little bit of a trick for us. But we know that that's really the data we need. Like, we really need to know how many more people were served, or how many dollars did you save? And so we have from quite a few of our groups initial data that has strong indicators that, we're definitely creating efficiencies and increasing our impact by bringing folks together. One example I'll just share, because I thought it was cool, was we helped Texas Health Action kind of absorb Waterloo Counseling. They were in a situation where they were probably going to dissolve, which was going to be the loss of a pretty significant mental health service for the LGBTQIA community. And then Texas Health Action helped absorb Waterloo. Well, in that, at the beginning of taking on Waterloo, I believe it was something like they had like 191 people on their wait list for getting into the mental health services. And 8 months later, that was down to like 6 people because of the efficiencies of the operations of this larger entity kind of coming in. So, that's the kind of stuff that we're interested in measuring, is to really see those real impacts.
I guess a question for both of you, thinking about sort of all of this interest, the time and resources, is there something that we could do as funders or donors potentially on this call to be helping to think about that work and sort of the time and resources that go into it? Maybe that's something that, an organization may be waiting to kind of apply to get help with that, because they're thinking that that may not be something, just any sort of biases that maybe you can help us think through as funders for some of that work, because we can see how important that is into helping sort of advance some of these collaborative actions, but maybe some lenses around that.
I think it's hard. It's not as sexy, and it's not as easy to see the impact or see the story. And I've been on some grant review committees where that has been in a proposal, right? We want to hire somebody to collect data, or we want to build a new system. And that's not as easy to see as we're now going to serve 100 more clients, or, those types of things. And so really understanding from a funder perspective that often the most important thing you can do is to fund that infrastructure piece, particularly because often other foundations and funders won't do that. And know that, that's the sticky, messy stuff, but that often really is most catalytic. And be open to also understanding, because I've seen this play out within Impact Austin and other, organizations, that often a smaller organization doesn't have the systems in place to, be able to answer all those questions or give you all the numbers. Doesn't mean they're not doing good work, right? So sometimes it's a leap of faith, and you have to trust them, even if they can't, immediately quantify things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think an openness to what you consider to be data, and an openness to what you consider to be evidence of impact, I think is really important. I mean, for me, if someone's not including a little bit of resources when they're trying to put something together that's going to go towards data and evaluation, it kind of concerns me, because that's a piece of any program. If you don't have an opportunity to be collecting data so that you can then keep improving your practice and share your story, to me, that's just an essential part of doing any of this kind of work. So I would hope that people would be excited when they see that people have the forethought to be embedding that into their program budgets, et cetera.
A couple more questions that we've gotten. Beth is asking, sounds like one of the main reasons organizational collaborations don't move forward is because of relationships. Is correct assumption, is her question.
I think that's oftentimes, it is about the people. Like, is there rapport? Do they get along? And it's unfortunate that it kind of comes down to that, but often, if you think about even in any kind of business, it's going to be about the people in the room. So, yes, I think that can be it. It can be the individuals. I've also seen it happen where the individual executive directors got along great, had really similar values, but then when they got the board involved, it kind of took a turn because there were different cultures amongst these different boards, and there wasn't the same kind of synergy. So, it is about relationships. at the end of the day. And you don't want to get into a collaboration if there's not going to be a good, positive working relationship, because it is challenging.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mentioned earlier that Andy started because a group of actors sort of recognized they were doing the same thing and said, hey, should we be talking to each other? But as the story goes, the initial conversation had happened like 5 years earlier, and somebody brought a group of people in the room together. And somebody who was in the room said there were too many egos in the room at the time, because all of these organizations were just kind of getting started. They were trying to chart their own course. They were trying to raise money, and it just wasn't the right time. And it was several years later that somebody said, okay, maybe we're at the point where it makes sense for us to start talking. And then I would add to what Karen said about, yeah, sometimes the EDs get along and then you have the board issue, or also sometimes the EDs aren't doing a good job of bringing their staff along. And it can feel threatening to staff, we're going to merge. Am I going to lose my job? I don't know about working with these other people. So I think there's, a kind of staff cultural component to it as well. That's really important.
And that makes a lot of sense. What do you all see as the difference between collaboration and collective impact efforts?
Well, collective impact essentially is a kind of collaboration. I think it's on the continuum. And I think it depends on how you're going about your collective impact. I think there's a lot of different ways people approach that work, sometimes more successful than others. I think generally collaboration where there seems to be a more evenly spread coming together is typically more kind of what we're looking for in terms of sustained collaboration, whereas the collective impact model typically relies upon a backbone organization really, helping thread together a lot of smaller organizations. So it is a kind of collaboration, and sometimes it's the right approach for a problem you're trying to solve. Sometimes I've seen things backfire where the organizations end up becoming sort of invisible to the backbone, and then that ends up creating problems and tension. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, Jenny, did you have any
thought?
Yeah, I agree with what Karen said. I'm not somebody that thinks very well in frameworks. I know they're important, but I'm kind of a just jump in and do it. So I guess I sort of think about it almost like there's collaboration with a little c and a big C, and like I just made that up, but there's some types of collaboration that are very formal and structured and have a whole kind of body of work around them, and sometimes it's just getting together and informally kind of figuring out how you work together and support each other. So that's probably the difference in the two frameworks. But I think it just depends on what you're trying to solve and come together to do.
Yep. So our last question is for Karen. Did you say that you help organizations figure out who they might benefit from collaborating from when they don't already know?
Sure, we can definitely do that. And that can look a lot of different ways. It just depends on kind of what kind of collaboration they're interested in creating. But part of what's great about Austin Together is that we have a wonderful team of advisors who helped fund and found our organization, who are still involved, and other folks from the community who have joined us. And through that network of people, we're very lucky to just have connections across Austin and the nonprofit sector. So oftentimes, if someone has a question like that, I might bring it to the advisors to see if anyone has any ideas. And we might just do a little bit of matchmaking. We're not going to make it happen, but we might make some introductions so that somebody could kind of start to think through. But that's definitely okay for someone to come and say, we know we're not the only person doing this. We don't want to do it alone, but we're not quite sure, who to do it with. We can certainly try to help with that piece.
And I would just add, that's one of the things I like about this collaboration that's been building with Impact Austin and Social Venture Partners and Austin Together, and the awareness of each other's strengths. Like, I have been in conversations both on the SVP side and I think the Impact Austin side, where we've looked at a nonprofit and thought, maybe we should send them to Austin Together, right? And just understanding kind of what everyone is doing, I think, is really helpful.
Great. So we have just a few minutes left in our session. This has been so wonderful to share time with both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise. I really appreciate it. I wondered if both of you might just have some final thoughts before we close today for our audience. Jenny, do you want to go first?
Join Impact Austin, join Social Venture Partners, become a guide with Austin Together. Get involved.
Look at that collaboration already. She's showing all the different. Karen, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Gosh, I'm not sure. I guess I would just say, collaboration is a mindset. It's a philosophy of how to live. And I think the more that we can all approach, even just our everyday lives, through thinking about how we can work together and make space for one another, have respect for one another, and understand each other's strengths and how we can come together, that's just like a snowball, right? And so the more that we can do that, and the more that I'm sure many of the members here are involved on boards and in organizations, the more they can bring that mentality and that culture, I think will go a long way over time to really shifting the way that we collectively approach, improving the lives of Central Texans.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. Just as Jenny was saying, just to reiterate, we hope that those of you who want to get involved do that through, SVP, Impact Austin, Austin Together, or other, organizations there's so many ways to get involved, right? If there are any questions that you may have about joining Impact Austin, or if you are interested in joining but finances are a barrier, I encourage you to reach out to us at contact@impactaustin.org. We want you to be a part of our collective. And if you don't identify as a woman, so that Impact Austin may not be the right fit for you, I encourage you to look up collective giving circles. There's so many here in Central Texas. We were just putting together an event a couple of weeks ago, and I think there was 15 or 17 on the list, and I'm sure there were things that we missed. So there's probably a collective giving circle that you can identify with, and that's for your passions that you're interested in. So just getting involved in your community. The one additional fun thing that I get to do, since this is the last session for Impact Austin, is announce the winner of our raffle. So we had a winter annual fund drive, and there was a raffle that our advancement team put together, and our winner is Roberta Rincon. So I'm not sure if she's on today's session, but we will be getting in touch with you. Thank you so much for all of those who donated to our annual fund drive as part of this raffle. We really appreciate your support of Impact Austin and helping us to put on events like this. So thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thanks for staying curious and informed. And we look forward to seeing you at another event soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.